Hey gang, how's it going? This is Nate on the Stone, and welcome to this latest episode of The Rolling Stone. If you've been around here before and if you've subscribed to the channel, first of all, thank you very much. I really appreciate your subscription. You kind of know the rules about these Rolling Stone episodes. And if you are here for the very first time, first of all, welcome. We're glad to have you. These videos are different from the ones that I upload every Tuesday in that there are very few cuts, clips, or anything of that sort. This is more of a stream of consciousness video where I give my initial thoughts, impressions about things that are currently in the news. So, without further ado, let us first talk about reparations. So, the big news, I guess, this past week is that on Wednesday, the 19th, Juneteenth, the anniversary of the last group of slaves in the United States, in Texas, learning that they were free, there was a hearing for the first time in 10 years of the House Subcommittee on the Constitution, Civil Rights, and Civil Liberties, where they were talking about the issue of reparations. There's a bill in Congress that has actually been proposed every year since 1989 regarding reparation. The idea that people who are descended from slaves, right? So slaves who are here in America, that they should be paid a certain amount by the federal government in compensation for their ancestors having been brought over here as slaves or for having just been enslaved. And this hearing was particularly newsworthy because two people there who spoke before the committee were the actor Danny Glover and the author Ta-Nehisi Coates. I hope I'm pronouncing that name correctly. Ta-Nehisi Coates is an award-winning writer. He really came to prominence in 2014 when he published an article in The Atlantic called The Case for Reparations. And of course, Danny Glover has been in movies for many, many years. He's a fixture in Hollywood. He was in those Lethal Weapons movies with Mel Gibson. He's in the movie Silverado, the Western, which is where I know him from. But there has been so much dust kicked up about this issue that I think it's clouding the real issue behind reparations. First, before we go any further, I have to share with you this quote from Danny Glover. And he said, quote, "This country is trapped in not telling the truth," unquote. Meaning, we're not telling the truth about slavery, which is one reason why we have to make reparations to the descendants of slaves. That is 180 degrees out of focus. I'm sorry, gang, but it seems to me that that is the only thing that we can talk about. What does Mr. Glover mean by not being honest? We have Martin Luther King Day, where we talk about the civil rights movement. We learn about segregation and Jim Crow. We learn about slavery. I mean, we make mea culpas about slavery. Right now, even though there is no hard evidence that Thomas Jefferson actually fathered a child or children with one of his slaves, Sally Hemings, that is part and parcel of the tour now at Monticello. We have gotten so race conscious, I should say, that even a statue of a singer from the 1930s, Kate Smith, whom practically no one remembers anymore, and if they hear her voice on the radio or singing one of her songs, they probably don't know her name, that has to be covered up because in the 1930s, she sang some songs that would today be socially frowned upon, rightly or wrongly, as being racially insensitive. So we are not trying to, not have this conversation. We're not trying to, cloud the issue or anything. That's about one of the only issues that we can talk about, race relations, and about how everything bad in the African American community today can be traced back to slavery. So that's the first thing that I wanted to say on this subject. The next thing, though, is actually what I've been noticing among the right. On Twitter, I've seen Allie Beth Stuckey, I've seen Michael Knowles, and a few other people, list the logical incoherencies about reparations. So, for example, Michael Knowles tweeted that, okay, the Cherokee Nation, right, the Cherokee Indians, they had black slaves. They brought their black slaves with them along the Trail of Tears. Does that mean that the Cherokee Nation is going to be forced to pay reparations to the descendants of those slaves? How does that square with intersectional identity politics, right? Who is the bigger victim? Cherokees because they're Native Americans, or Black Americans because they're black? Who actually is a direct descendant of a slave? How close to a slave do you have to be related to in order to get reparations? Who is descended directly from slave owners, right, to be forced to pay reparations? Will the descendants of the freedmen, right, free black men who were plantation owners and who were slave owners during the antebellum South before the Civil War, are they going to be forced to pay reparations? All of these great criticisms, great critiques as to why reparations won't logically work. And it doesn't add up to a hill of beans, and I'm going to tell you why. It doesn't add up to a hill of beans because the ideologues on the left, I would bet anything that they already know about the logical inconsistencies in their claims. I'm sure that they've already talked about it, because when you sit down and think about it, all of these inconsistencies, all of these problems make themselves known. Okay? There's no getting around it. So what is the purpose? What is the purpose of reparations? Well, I'm convinced that the purpose of reparations, the idea of reparations, is to reinforce the idea among, so-called minorities today that you are still a victim. You are still being victimized. The system, quote unquote, is still oppressing you, and therefore you have to be given compensation for that. Because again, how just is it to say that since I'm the descendant of a slave, again, I've never been a slave, I wasn't brought over here as a slave, I haven't been a slave, I was never a slave at any point in my life, but simply because I might be the descendant of a slave, again, how closely, we don't know, or simply because of the color of my skin, I deserve reparations. That's not just. Justice is giving to an individual what is owed to him, okay? And if you haven't been a slave, you're not owed compensation because you personally have not been wronged. So again, the idea behind this is to reinforce this idea that you are a victim, you are oppressed, you deserve to be compensated. And behind that idea is the implication, again, that minorities, however you define them in America today, you are helpless. You are just an ant to be crushed under the heel of the system, whether that's white nationalism, white supremacy, the patriarchy, or some combination of the two when we get into intersectionalism. And that, of course, means that the only people who can help you, the only way that you as a minority can actually get ahead in the country, in the system, is with the help of the vanguard, with the elites, with the enlightened. That's the only way that you're going to get ahead. That is a huge, first of all, it's a lie. Okay, because systematic racism is over. It's gone. Hallelujah, praise the Lord. It is gone. There are still individual racists in the country. There are always going to be those. White, black, red, brown, whatever. But the actual systematic oppression, like we saw in the South before the Civil Rights Movement with Jim Crow or anything like that, that is gone. So first of all, that implication is inherently dishonest. The second thing is that it is just insulting to the nth degree to the dignity of the human person to say that you cannot make it. You are, you can't make it without us. We are the great saviors of society. That takes away free will, it takes away ingenuity, it takes away industry, it takes away just sheer perseverance and the idea that whatever my circumstances, I sure as hell am not going to let that stand in my way. Like the actor Samuel L. Jackson said, he was born in Chattanooga, Tennessee. He made himself a promise, and he said, I told myself I was not going to live and die in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And what happened to him? He became one of the biggest, most successful movie stars today. I love Samuel L. Jackson. Love his acting, love his characters. I love the guy, not like I met him personally, but I just love his personality from the little that I've read and seen in interviews. So there's all that. And then on top of that, to say one more thing on this subject before we move on, this is just a coward's way of shifting the issue. The idea, again, is to throw money at it, and the problem will solve itself. We've thrown money at education. We've thrown money at the opioid crisis. We've thrown money at homelessness. We've thrown money, to create jobs. And what happens? So many times, the money, it might help on the surface for a little bit, but it doesn't solve the root problem, because guess what? Every year in the budget, we have to allocate more funds for this problem. More funds over here. We don't get to the root problem. One problem that the African American community has, which leads to, crime, and which leads to unhappiness and poverty and so many other things, fatherlessness, broken homes, single motherhood. But we can't talk about that. That's racist, right? That's anti-woman, that's anti-black, that's racist. We can't talk about that. So instead of actually asking uncomfortable questions and going to the root of the problem and solving that, we're taking the coward's way out, okay, when we talk about reparations. And we're saying just throw money at it and it'll be fine. But some problems, like the dissolution of the family, can't be solved by throwing money at it. That's not what's happening. So all the people on the right, and I'm guilty of this too, mea culpa, if you check my thread on Twitter, we have to stop just pointing out the logical inconsistencies, of reparations, because there's a whole bushel full of them. But it's not going to make a bit of difference. It's not going to be worth a tinker's damn, because again, the left is making an emotional narrative argument, and we have to counter with a narrative argument that's just as strong, that actually solves the problem. So there's that story. Our next story is about flag burning. Okay? Oh me, oh my, oh me, oh my. So on Flag Day, June 14th, President Trump tweeted out his support of a proposed constitutional amendment that would ban flag burning. It would actually make burning a federal flag burning an American flag some sort of federal offense. And Trump tweeted out his support of that idea. And this caused a huge tsunami of criticism on the right. Interestingly enough, again on Twitter, I was reading, some of these justifications about how we have to allow the flag to continue to be burned. And the consensus that I was seeing was that, look, it's a jerk thing to do, it's, an a-hole thing to do, but people have the right to be jerks and to be a-holes, so, free speech. And in fact, on Twitter, I saw, for example, Joe Walsh tweet out, "Freedom comes first. In America, you are free to burn the American flag." Surprisingly, maybe not so surprisingly, haven't quite made up my mind on that, Allie Beth Stuckey, the host of the Relatable podcast from The Blaze TV, she tweeted out a series of tweets, actually, in defense of this idea. Not in defense of flag burning, okay? I want to make that clear. These people are not defending burning the flag as such. They are defending the idea that burning the flag is free speech, and therefore, since we defend free speech, we have to defend your right to burn the flag. I want to make that clear, just in case people are thinking, Allie Beth Stuckey or someone else there, they actually are encouraging people to burn the flag. No. No one that I saw on the right was encouraging people to burn the flag. They were encouraging the idea that to protect freedom of speech, we have to protect people's right to burn the flag, just to make that clear. But anyway, she said in a series of tweets, the unique indestructibility of Old Glory is that she can be burned. Burning the flag is an atrocious act, but our freedom to do so as a form of expression shows just how radical our defense of liberty is in America. So that was her take. They are completely 100% wrong here. I'm just going to come out and say it. And I know people are going to talk about free speech. Look, I don't think that free speech covers burning the flag as a form of protest. Someone else on Twitter tried to say that you only have to burn the flag to try and get attention to the seriousness of this issue. But I have a question there too, because of course, if it's A-okay to burn the flag, right? Then in our hypersensitive selfie age, people are going to logically go to that extreme in order to gain attention for themselves and for whatever they're protesting, which means that more and more people are actually going to do that, which means more and more people are actually going to get used to the idea of the flag being burned or just seeing the flag being burned. Pretty soon people are going to be desensitized to it, and so pretty soon you're right back where you were to start with, where the flag getting burned, it's just, another thing. Whereas before it would have been, oh my God, what are you doing? Now it's just, no big deal, just another protest. So there's a problem with that. My position stems from the fact that the flag is not just a piece of cloth, okay? And it is not just, a symbol of our ideas, because even Allie Beth Stuckey admitted that it's a symbol of our ideas. The flag is more than that. The flag is, in a sense, a reliquary or a tabernacle, if you will, of, yes, our ideas, our principles, our values, and our history. If you want to know, sort of just in a nutshell, the history, the idea of America, history, people, events, dreams, aspirations, principles, that's the American flag. It's all right there. And those 13 white and red stripes, the blue field, and at this point, the 50 white stars. It's all held in there. That's what makes it so precious. And that's why we have so many rules regarding, its flying and its presentation, so that we don't dishonor it, because it is almost a it is almost like a secular relic or a holy thing for a secular country. Kind of a paradox there, but that's the gist of it. So the very idea again of burning the flag is obnoxious and terrible and atrocious and horrible. So I agree with all of them there. The problem, though, is when they say that you have to do that to defend free speech, because here is my question. We have freedom of speech. You can make the argument, and I believe this, that free speech is a natural right. Okay. So the government doesn't grant free speech in the First Amendment. It just recognizes the natural right of free speech, i.e. free thought, free communication in the First Amendment. The government recognized that, okay. So the American system, not just the Constitution and the government, but our way of life, our culture, our society, recognizes that freedom of speech, right? As a natural right. Well, if the emblem of the country that publicly proclaims that right and protects that right, if the emblem of that country is allowed to be desecrated by being burnt, then can the ideas, can the principles, can the values of that country actually survive too, right? Can you actually have the right and chop away at the foundation of the right, or at least I shouldn't say the foundation, but the structure that actually protects that right? Can you do that? Can you really, really do that? Because again, people will say, it's a jerk thing to do, but that's why, families and churches and communities, they have to teach why that's wrong. Usually, I would agree with it, yes. But also, if you are raised in a milieu, in a society that culturally does not respect the flag, again, because if you say that the flag can be burned, you are implicitly saying that the flag does not have to be respected. The flag does not have to be honored, because if you're peeved enough, you can go out and burn that sucker and torch it. So it doesn't matter how many rules and we have for flying her, showing her, presenting her, carrying her. It doesn't amount to a hill of beans, because if we're just peeved, we can burn it. So if you allow the flag to be burned, ultimately, you are saying that as a society, we do not respect the flag, we do not protect the flag, we do not honor the flag. And so if that's the society that you're living in, and being raised in that society, you are inevitably going to get some of those ideas. It's inevitable. No matter what your parents try to teach you, no matter what your church tries to teach you, again, and we can go through lists about where this has happened before, you're not going to have as deep a reverence for the flag, and therefore for your home, your homeland, and the ideas, principles, and history, and events, and people that made your homeland what it is. You're going to weaken it. So, can freedom exist without that structure, right? And then even, can the country exist without it? Because it's very interesting. I believe it was in The Abolition of Man. C.S. Lewis said that soldiers, they don't fight for a logical proposition. They don't fight for a logical syllogism. They fight for a flag, right? But if the flag is just a piece of cloth that can be burned whenever, then are people really going to honor the country? Are people going to want to fight for the country, whether that's internally or externally? Right? So those are really my ideas. Because saying that, just one more point on this, gang, saying that freedom of speech, which is protected by the United States, not just the government, but the society, the culture, right? To say that freedom of speech, which is protected by this country's culture, demands that you disrespect, or you allow people to disrespect the emblem of that culture in the name of freedom, seems very cannibalistic to me. Because you're saying, in the name of freedom, we have to dishonor and undercut the institutions, the society, the culture, and the structures that are actually allowing us to exercise this freedom. So that is why I set myself entirely against people who say, even for defending free speech, that the flag should be allowed to be burned. If you're mad enough at your country that you want to buy a flag, take it home, burn it, defecate on it, tear it apart, you know what? Fine. You be the jerk. We're not going to put telescreens in your home and spy on you to make sure that that's what you do. But don't do that in public. That is just an intellectually lazy way. When people had real grievances, Martin Luther King Jr. during the Civil Rights Movement, or Susan B. Anthony during the women's suffrage movement, or Booker T. Washington, I don't think any of them burned American flags. They actually appealed to people's minds and hearts. They didn't go for cheap theatrics. So, there's that. And our final story for this episode comes to us from MasterCard. The beautiful thing about the modern age is that even when a business practice is just commonsensical, it's like you don't even have to think about it. It will be completely undercut in the name of being woke. Because MasterCard came out, earlier this week, on Tuesday or Wednesday, I believe, and said that in honor of International Pride and Pride Month, they were changing the rules for their credit cards, for applying for their credit cards. Now, transgender people will not have to put down their legal name for their card. They can just choose the name that they use with the gender that they identify with. And one of the people interviewed for this story, who's transgender, said, I actually feel unsafe, or when I have to have something that has my own name on it, my legal name on it, which for whatever reason made me think about the movie Somewhere in Time with Christopher Reeve and Jane Seymour, where to go back in time to meet Jane Seymour, Christopher Reeve has to basically hypnotize himself into thinking that he's in 1912, which means he has to get rid of everything that reminds him that he's actually in, I forget what the modern age, 1978 or whenever the movie takes place. It's kind of like this, having a card with my legal name and not whatever name that fits with my self-described gender. It's kind of like that. Oh my gosh, it breaks the spell of self-hypnotism that I've had to cast over myself in order to do that. And again, this is just non-commonsensical, because what business would actually open itself up to abuse like this, right? Allowing people to put another name other than their legal name on a card, basically letting you borrow your money, allowing people to borrow your money under an assumed name, right? And not your legal name. That just blows. That is just not commonsensical at all. Forget about whether it's bigoted or hateful or whatever. It just doesn't make any sense from a business point of view, especially when you're an international company like MasterCard that deals in loaning people money, letting people borrow money, your money. So there's that. But there's also a deeper issue here that I just want to touch on really quickly, because I know I've been blathering on and on and on for a while. And it's this. In a tweet, MasterCard justified this by saying that everyone has to be free, to live out your own truth, to live out who you are, right? Well, that's great and all. That sounds nice. But the truth is that only some truths or some identities are being allowed, right? So if someone is transgender, or they just identify as a different gender besides, whether they're a man or a woman, and they choose a completely different name, don't legally change their name, just could choose a completely different name, that has to be honored because that's their truth. However, someone like Jack Phillips, the baker in Colorado, who is still being persecuted for his beliefs, FYI, or Barronelle Stutzman, the florist from Washington State, they're not allowed to live their truth, their religious beliefs. No, if they do that, they are going to be persecuted and prosecuted by the culture, by society, by ideologues, and by the government itself. So what MasterCard is actually showing in this story, and I'm sorry, this was supposed to be a funny story, but it's getting serious too. What this story shows is that there is a new hierarchy in town, right? Only some beliefs are going to be respected. Only some beliefs are going to be buttressed. Other beliefs are going to be cut down. This is one of the great things. This is one of the ironies that I love about the left. They say that hierarchies are bad, right? Being stifled of your identity is bad. It's horrible. And yet, what they're actually saying, and what the truth of what their actions prove, is that no, only some identities can't be stifled. Other identities, they completely can be stifled. Some truths that people live by, so whether those are universal truths or subjective truths, not getting into that right here, right now, but those cannot be buttressed. Those can't be defended. Those can't be live and let live, just accepted, and we'll all be happy and we'll all be tolerant of each other and get along. No. Some are going to be punished. Some are going to be rewarded and built up. And once again, once you have that sort of a system, who gets to decide which truths will be, put out there in the public, which truths are going to be protected by society, and which ones aren't? Again, this isn't about, finding a genuine common good for society through debate and argument, and then actually moving forward with that common good. This is just a power arbitrarily saying that no, this is okay, but that's not okay. Why is it? Because that's how we think. We're in charge. Get used to it. And if you disagree with us, shut up. That really is what MasterCard has proven with this story. So at least they're being honest. At least the masks are coming off, and we can all say we are definitely living in the postmodern world. But anyway, gang, that's about all for this episode. I've talked long enough, so hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching. Have a great weekend, and I will see you all on Tuesday. Ciao.